Danny, another weekend. I think we got like another little hit on our hands. This week we had Alex Collmer. Alex is the CEO of VidMob. We've known Alex and the VidMob team pretty much since inception. They were, I would say, Snapchat's like best partner back in the day. They really were just like the epitome of like awesome partner. We recorded this a few weeks ago, and even since then, they've made some huge announcements about what they're doing with AI. They brought on a new CRO. And this is, after I think they've now raised like $150 million or something crazy like that. So it's been just a crazy kind of story for them. Super fun conversation to have.
Yeah, James, it was a really fun conversation. I know we recorded this a few weeks ago. Sometimes, though, you just got to wait and make things perfect before we actually put it out there for the listening audience. And that actually brings me to what we've done recently with Market. Sometimes you just want to revisit past chats. You want to think about something before you actually put it out there. And so we just launched Save Chats with Market, where you can actually revisit those past chats while you're talking about your products or campaigns or your ads. And so now you can look back at those past chats and even pick chats up right where you left off, even if you left off a month ago. It's a very cool, very powerful feature. I think all listeners should go check it out at withmarket.ai.
Danny, A for effort. Not the smoothest tie-in to the Market sponsorship, but well done. And Alice Hamburger would be, I think, proud of us.
Thanks, James. I definitely think he'd be proud of us. And even though this week may not have been a home run, you can't hit the ball if you don't swing. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going for the fences. But with that, let's get to this week's podcast. Welcome back to Taking Inventory. This week, we're excited to welcome Alex Collmer, a longtime friend, long before the podcast, friend of the podcast, CEO of VidMob, and has done a ton of very interesting, very cool things throughout his career. So, Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, fellas. I've been patiently waiting to join the Taking Inventory discussion here, and I was very pleased when you asked me. So thanks.
No, it's a long time coming, so we're glad we were able to make it work. Why don't we start your career? I mean, you started in console gaming, went to mobile gaming, now founded and CEO of VidMob. But for people listening, I think one of the coolest things in your background is that you were behind Def Jam Rapstar. So let's talk a little bit about that and kind of your whole background from console to where you are.
Yeah, sure. So that may be the most surprising things to most people that meet me is that I had anything to do with Def Jam Rapstar. But yeah, so listen, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I actually left Cornell after my sophomore year, ran a bar and some other businesses, and then used that to go back and finish my engineering degree. So I got a taste of entrepreneurship early, and frankly, could never really get the taste out of my mouth. So I started a number of kind of smaller businesses as I, kind of matured through my career. And probably the first meaningful one was a business I started with Jason Donnell called Autumn Games, which was, basically a view that the games business hadn't really matured the same way the film world had. And game developers were still sort of like nameless, faceless employees for the publishers they worked for. And we believed that we could help provide capital to sort of break out some of the top talent and help them make new franchises. So first thing we did was we partnered with a couple of the founders of Rockstar Games, helped them get the license for the Def Jam brand, and set about to make in a sense what was sort of a parallel to Rock Band and Guitar Hero, but for hip hop. And so that was super fun. A couple of years of my life working with the Def Jam crew and helping to get that game out. I think we launched that in around 2010.
Crazy. And how you kind of hear like horror stories about how long it takes to launch a game and like the just like the lack of, I guess, like feedback loops of like what people are going to think about it until you put it out there. Is that how it works basically?
Yeah. And then for console, it's so much worse, right? For a mobile game, you can get something out and sort of iterate on it forever. But for a console game, I mean, you're basically, coming up with a budget, set down for at least for a big AAA game, 2 to 3 years at least. I mean, with GTA or something like that, it might be 5+ years. But you're just working with no feedback whatsoever. And in that case, that was a pretty substantial investment. We spent multiple years making it, and didn't get any signal back in terms of where we were heading until the day it hit GameStop and all those spots. So a little bit of a older world at that point. But what I would say is that building VidMob makes a lot more sense to me. You get like kind of everyday feedback from your clientele. Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing wrong? How do we make changes? So very different.
And so maybe let's talk, like, what is VidMob? Explain to listeners like how that started and the evolution of the company since you founded it.
Yeah. So, I mean, VidMob started in a lot of ways, it's kind of born out of elements of the old sort of games business. When you're making video games, you're living at sort of the intersection of technology risk and art risk. And in a lot of ways, I think that's kind of what VidMob is. This is very much about bringing like creative and data together. And so the original thought was just, hey, moving from a generally static internet, text and images, to a generally video internet is going to result in sort of like creative friction everywhere. And my view at the time was that someone would have to build a technology platform that could sort of help scale creativity, make it more accessible. And what was really compelling was, and this is kind of funny in light of what's happening now, but I felt like, hey, AI and automation and globalization and all these things are coming. They're going to, basically pressure labor everywhere. And my view was that creativity was going to be one of the areas of the labor market that was best protected. And so that if we built that platform, we could actually help create millions of quality jobs. And so that was really sort of the founding ethos. And we launched VidMob as a marketplace in early 2016, and shortly after, and basically just started helping people who needed improved content with editors who knew how to make quality performant content. And shortly thereafter, we started partnering with some of the platforms, and I think our first platform we partnered with was a company called Snapchat.
I remember those days. Even before we got to get into the Snapchat part shortly, but even before that, weren't you guys like the app of the day or something on the App Store? Like it had a life of its own before even like pure media, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, and this is just like this is sort of where you guys are in entrepreneurship. But I mean, I was on Extra with Mario Lopez. I think we were even featured on The View at some point. I mean, like, nowadays when we have employees join and they're like, wait, what? Like, why on earth would it make any sense for you to be on Mario Lopez show? And I still don't really have a good answer for that, but he's a very nice guy. And shortly after that, we were, I think we actually got named one of the apps of the year. And so it was featured at launch because like at the time, everyone that had an iPhone had video on it, and I think like 0.0000% of them have any idea how to make something out of that anyone wants to watch. And so it made a lot of sense, but it didn't drive a lot of business, right? So that led to a bunch of downloads, but the idea that VidMob was going to be a consumer solution was really not the right place for us. And what we started to see was that business demand, and I think probably within 6 months of kind of product launch, it started to become clear what our product market fit was going to be. And once we saw that, then we could really sort of like lean in and say, hey, there are a lot of marketers who are struggling to make performant video content, and this is an area that we can really help. And we kind of went like all in on that.
Yeah, I mean, even on the Snap side, I think one of the main reasons we started working with you guys early on is marketers didn't know how to adapt their creative or their ads from TV or kind of other formats to a vertical video that's less than 15 seconds, that's watched on your phone with sound as part of the experience. And so like, what was that transition for the business to like figure out that like, okay, my TV ads don't work on Meta, my Meta ads don't work on Snap, and like this creative process is entirely different than what I've as a company have set up over the last 50 years. And so like, what was that for you guys, and how did you help the market kind of speed up that process?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a. I mean, being totally honest, like when we started the business, like it never occurred to us that big companies like L'Oreal or J&J or whomever would ever need any kind of creative help with their advertising creative. I just assumed that their either internal teams or agency apparatuses like kind of had everything sorted out. And so when we started to hear that Snap had a new format with vertical, and that people just didn't have creative for it, and that it was taking months to get creative made, and that it was oftentimes basically like reshaped television creative, it kind of stunned me, and we're like, well, hey, we can fill that void, and we just sort of stepped in, and this is a story told a 1,000 ways over the last 30 years, but lo and behold, when you start building workflow software and other technology, you can take a process that's existed for decades and make it a whole lot more effective. And so that's exercise that was taking months we could do in a day, and a process that was costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, someone could get done through our marketplace for a couple $1,000s.
I remember. Yeah. I remember when we first met you guys, and we were sort of similarly had this problem where, and it just shows like how naive we were. We were like, okay, we have this awesome ad format. It's very cool. It takes up the whole screen. And we built this ad system, and it was like working pretty well. And then people were like, we don't have vertical ads. We're like, what do you mean? Like, you don't have vertical ads? You're like a really, really, really big company. Go make some. And I remember us finding out like that wasn't that simple. And so, I don't even know if people even know this, but like for a while, for a long time, I mean, like VidMob and Snap were like as strategic as partners as you could get. I mean, you guys literally were like the creative editing marketplace that we basically relied on. And it was really, I would say, I mean, even to this day, I know you guys have a good relationship with them, but ironically, the thing that made it where like, there was kind of a use case probably just like broader for you guys was when Instagram finally ripped off our formats, and then everyone did that. And then for you guys, then like that kind of opened up the floodgates for you to solve everyone's problem. Is that like a fair sort of retelling? Yeah.
It is. And I mean, like, first of all, I mean, like I just have like nothing but love for, the Snap team from those days, even on to today. I mean, in so many ways, that partnership kind of helped us find what VidMob needed to be. And I mean, you guys remember the story, but this is something that probably like basically no one knows. I remember we were meeting, and it was at CES, must have been like the beginning of 2017. And we had done some initial trials, and those things had gone well. And I remember I said to you, I'm like, hey, at some point you guys are going to build self-service ad tools so that people can buy on the Snap platform. And when you do that, I imagine those smaller marketers are going to have the same problems that we're solving today for these sort of large clients. We want to be like a button there so that people can just push it to solve their creative. And I can't remember if it was which one of you it was, but one of you was like, listen, our engineers are busy. They're tied up with our stuff. Why don't you build that? And if you build it, you can put the button wherever you want. And so I ran, it was, 1 a.m. I ran back. I called James Kupernick, our CTO. I was like, we're going to build a campaign manager to buy. So, and I think a week later we flew out and presented designs to basically stand up a platform to buy ads on Snap. And we built that. And for some period of time, like 5 or 6 months, I think we were basically like the only way to buy ads on Snap.
Yeah, there were like Accenture consultants. I don't even, this. There was like consultants that we had hired to train SMBs on how to use the VidMob ad buying tool. I mean, it was like, I wonder if we were public, but yeah, I guess we were.
I think it was like just before. Oh no, maybe it timed around the IPO.
I think it did. I'm not sure if they disclosed how much of duct tape and Band-Aids that self-service tool at the time was, but it was hugely helpful. And like, I think, yeah, it just shows, it's like, I think it just shows sort of a testament to how like flexible you guys have been in working with these platforms. I guess fast forwarding like today, like, I don't know, maybe this is good just context for everyone to know, but like, since then you guys have raised like hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, can you kind of give people a sense of how big the company is now, how much you raised, all that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. And it's all sort of downstream from that moment, right? Because like basically once we started building that, it forced us to kind of start plugging into ads APIs. And once we started to do that, the business really started to change. And today VidMob is basically a SaaS platform focused around creative data. So it's like a totally different company. But yeah, so we've now, I guess about a year and a half ago, we raised $110 million Series D. We have offices all over the world, and today are really fairly deeply partnered with the whole kind of modern platform ecosystem. So not just Snap, but Meta and Google and Amazon and TikTok and LinkedIn and Pinterest, kind of all of them. And through that, are working with I think either 70 or 80% of the top 50 marketers in the world. So pretty big penetration, and it's basically just been sort of a continual evolution, really to try and move more and more towards being a strategic partner for clients, right? So that initial business, basically helping them make better and more performant, social or walled garden content. We were really good at it, but it was pretty clear that was going to be a noisy space, and was probably an area that was going to be difficult to carve out kind of long-term differentiation. And so we started building workflow to manage the creative process, because our clients were now creating hundreds of different variations and ad creative for various platforms. And the last part of that workflow was plugging into ads APIs, so we could make it really easy, single button push distribution. So instead of like downloading 1,000 video files and then we transferring them to your media agency, you just like push one button, it would go into the ad accounts everywhere, and then your media team could pick it up and traffic it from there. And once we did that, we started getting data back, and we could see how like every piece of creative that we touched performed. And I think like that was really where it became clear to us that VidMob could do something that was unique in the world. And so we essentially invented this idea of like creative intelligence and started using AI. I mean, this was back in 2017 to, be able to allow all of our clients to just connect their Snap account, connect their TikTok account, and it would ingest all their creative, run it through our AI pipelines, and understand frame by frame every creative decision that's been made. So like, when's the logo coming in? What's the color contrast between it and the background? Is the actress smiling or scowling? Is she holding up the box of the lotion or rubbing it on her hand? Like, what's the pacing of the ad? It's like, like all of this times infinity. And then we could take all that creative data and compare it to like literally any behavior you want to try and drive, and go back and help marketers understand not which ads are working, because they knew that, and not how well they're working, but like actually like why. Why was this ad working last week and it's not working this week? And today, we've now processed something like 30 trillion impressions and run this analysis on over 10 million ads, and really have what I would argue is sort of one of the truly unique data assets left in the world, as this kind of like cross-platform, creative data business.
What's funny hearing you talk about that is, like, I remember back at that time, 2017, a lot of advertisers were starting to do creative testing, but it was things like, I'm going to send 5 ads out and the call to action is going to be a different color, or we're going to flash some stats on the screen versus, a 5-star review versus some other text. And like, that's going to be our creative testing. But what you're talking about are just, thousands of micro elements within these video ads, which obviously are 15, 30 seconds of different pieces of content and different kind of assets within the asset. And so how do you convince a L'Oreal that like hey, you need to start thinking about more than just like this little call to action. It's actually the actor you're using and the micro expressions he or she has and the product placement and the logo placement. Like, how do you start that? And then how do you actually start impacting their creative process, right? Where they can move quickly and start to actually use your creative data to make better decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think like first you just have to earn their trust, right? Because someone like L'Oreal is like, couldn't be farther away from like a games company. I mean, I remember, like with my old games business, and I say this with love because I sort of come from that industry. Like, the idea of like a sophisticated marketer in the games world was just like throw as much garbage against the wall as you can and let the algorithm figure out what's going to work best. And like, there's just no part of that in the way L'Oreal thinks. And frankly, I think they're right. Like they're like the gamer's thinking, hey, give a million monkeys a keyboard and one of them's going to write the Iliad. L'Oreal's thinking, all right, well, even if one writes the Iliad, that still means 999,000 have to read a bunch of garbage. And so, we started with them it was actually through an introduction from Facebook, where, they're like, hey, L'Oreal has some assets that either like failed or got rejected. Can you help them out? And we just started like kind of working with them. And I think over time, as they saw, hey, VidMob's assets are performing so much better than all of our other assets. Like, how is that? And then we sort of talk about creative data and how we use it. And then they got interested, and we went through this process where we actually started using creative analytics to actually determine not just like the platform best practices, but the specific brand best practices for every one of their brands. And so we call these like the golden rules. And once we had those rules determined, for CeraVe, we should do this or that on Instagram, but not the same thing on Snap, or but for Yves Saint Laurent, you do these things. Once we had those, we could then score all the content, not just the stuff VidMob was making, but the stuff that their huge agency apparatus was making everywhere. And that process of kind of forcing adherence to these data-driven rules ended up having a massive impact on their creative performance everywhere. And so it took years. And they had to trust that this was brand accretive, not just performance, right? Because like, if you're damaging brand, they don't care if you're going to drive up, like clicks or purchases for a day. But it's been a wonderful partnership, and actually just the DEI product that we rolled out that helps our clients now ensure that the content they're creating everywhere in the world is actually representative of their audience. It was something that we helped, develop kind of in partnership with them, now probably 5 years into that relationship.
And do you see a world where like, if you're L'Oreal, it can, especially with these LLMs and just a lot of the generative AI stuff, and your understanding of their brand values and brand performance is the idea that over time that like they have some form of conversation with VidMob, whatever input that is, but it's going to help them create just like the right creative for the right audience kind of in general. Like it's going to be their creative assistant that like knows them and what they care about. Like that feels like there's not many people who can do that other than you guys. And like maybe the trade desk, you could argue, has some cross network view of it.
So, I mean, you're getting to exactly, where we think like value and sort of like competitive advantage lies for marketers, right? Like I think right now, when people think about AI, a lot of the enthusiasm and the hype is focused on the kind of like the edge layer, like AI and sort of, generative like content creation tools, or AI and like, media decisioning or other. And our view is that those tools are going to largely be kind of commodities. It's commodity is the wrong word. There's not going to be strategic advantage there. Like I think of it as, Google Maps is one of the most incredible pieces of software ever invented. Like the idea that you could literally type in like any address and it'll tell you like exactly how to get there, what gas station, like it's amazing. But it's not a competitive advantage because first of all, everyone on the planet has it. And second of all, you could just easily use Apple Maps or Waze or, any of these other tools, and they're all going to get you there. but the input, like putting the right or wrong address in, is like everything. And I think it's the same with the generative tools, like L'Oreal and others. They're going to integrate and utilize multiple generative tools, but it's not really going to matter whether they're using DALL-E or Midjourney or Firefly or Runway or whatever. What we're hoping is that VidMob's creative data forms the basis of that input, so that if they can make literally 1 billion possible mascara ads, well, there's one that's going to make people buy it at the highest frequency. And so that's what we're trying to get to. And you're exactly right. I mean, the way we think of it is like today, when we're delivering like insights to a client, they're thinking of it as like human readable insights. When you're trying to drive 3-second view rate on TikTok for women in their 20s in the Philippines, you should do this. But that exact insight can be just as easily translated into a prompt informed with his brand historical guidelines, and then lead directly to an automated response. And that's kind of where this is all going.
And as you talk about it, and we've been talking a lot about ads and marketing, but is there a world in which what you're building at VidMob has implications for other creative disciplines, whether it's film and television, game development, app development, product design, websites, whatever it may be? Like, do you see a world in which it feeds all of this stuff?
Not in the near term. I mean, I think like when I think about sort of VidMob and our roadmap over the next few years, I see sort of two axes of expansion. So first is just expanding kind of horizontally across the rest of the digital marketing continuum. So if our roots were in sort of social walled garden, laterally next is Trade Desk and open web. We already have a DV360 integration, Amazon DSP. I hope Trade Desk is soon. Rohit, I'm talking to you. And across from there we get into retail media. That's another important category. We have a fairly deep partnership with Amazon already, but you should probably see Walmart, Kroger, other important pieces there, and then into CTV. So those are all like things that we either have partially covered or are moving towards. And then, Drew, to your question, like I do think that like ultimately like all communications are creative. And when properly instrumented, we believe creative intelligence can be applied to improve, any of those, communications. So before we get into like, TV and other things, I think it's more like organic posts, web content. Like there's a lot in that like customer journey that can be improved before we get into the real far field stuff. Like, and to be honest, like film and things like. I think it gets to kind of like the root of like what VidMob is. Like in shorter format, I believe we process media like machines. Like if you're only looking at something for a few seconds, you process it kind of like an AI. But if you're, I just watched The Shawshank Redemption with my kids this weekend. Like I doubt there's anything we can do to make that movie any better.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you're talking about it, kind of. Obviously, then we played around with a bunch of these AI tools and we're building some ourselves. And, I do think that like the thing that we found to be the most impactful thing is really just like the prompt, to your point. It's just like, the model you're hitting, at least we found increasingly the models themselves are becoming commoditized. And it's just like, can we get you closer to the right prompt for your goal? Do you think over time for you guys, I guess, what I'm trying to ask is like, do you think you're going to end up being impartial to the model that you hit? Meaning like L'Oreal likes Midjourney, so we hit Midjourney, but J&J likes, DALL-E, so we're going to hit DALL-E. Or do you think instead you guys may be able to fork some open source thing and become the model? It's
really interesting. I mean, I think what we're seeing now is that certain models work better for certain categories. And so, that's kind of where things are today, at least for us. And so we're seeing that, one model works better for CPG and another model works better for, auto. Then we're sort of, working on both those. But I think there's going to be, I mean, like the way I sort of look at it is just like anyone in the space, you, me, and everyone else, you just have to build your company like specifically to be the most flexible organism possible, because it's all going to change so fast forever.
Yeah.
Like, and so for some people that's really scary. And like, we're basically trying to build this like hyper flexible company and really focused on, we are the creative data company. And we're going to be able to plug that meaningfully into, these variety of places. And I think that gives us the hope is that it makes us really, really flexible, whichever model ends up being better at any given moment.
And how do you get brands comfortable with the idea that like this AI and these models are not dictating, but helping them understand all the inputs and the actions and the outcomes that are being taken, but that they still maintain control, right? Because I would think that a lot might get fearful that like the tail starts wagging the dog, where the creative data just starts dictating what the brand message is and the brand's identity, and they kind of lose control.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and this is why I love being up at like the enterprise level, because I do believe, and this has been sort of part of VidMob's like root ethos. Like, I think that going forward, like moats are going to be different than they were, for like the first sort of 30, 40 years of like sort of venture startups. And I think kind of pure software businesses now are more at risk when it's, we have co-pilots that can write code, instantly. And we've just been very interested, like really since inception, of like building technology businesses at the intersection of like technology and human systems. And so, Druger, like, I think there's going to always be some sort of human in that in that chain, and I think when you're thinking about these like a brand management for an LVMH or L'Oreal or one of these folks, I don't see them turning it over fully, and this is why I'm sort of skeptical of some of these products like Advantage Plus or PMax, even though they're clearly delivering great results, and I think they're going to be boons within the SMB and mid-market. But if you're P&G and you're basically a marketing company, how can you turn that over with no control to Meta or Google or someone else, like, and not be worried about the like existential nature of your business? And so I think where we go is, someone is going to have to build kind of cross-platform solutions that do offer that control. And someone can say, hey, I see what the AI is recommending, but I disagree, and I'm not going to do that, and maybe even more importantly, all of those learnings. Because the reality is, when you have these things hooked up, if you have 100,000 pieces of creative in the market and you have millions of customers responding to them like, every minute of the day, there's so much that you can learn, not just about that creative, but about your customer itself. And if all that learning is being captured within Meta and none of it's coming to you, that's a problem. Yeah. And so like our view is like someone needs to build almost, instead of a black box, kind of like a transparent box that's flowing information up and out to agency partners, to brands themselves. And I think that'll be net beneficial to the Metas. But I think like, someone's going to have to build something that does offer that type of control.
Yeah, it'd be really, really cool, given the spot you guys sit, if like someone could like, you could like start asking questions to VidMob about, like, you guys have an audit trail of that. So it's like you could footnote all of it based off all these impressions. It's like such a powerful thing to like actually prove them wrong. Because I agree with you, for the big brands in particular, and even the small ones, you kind of get into this weird like Minority Report pre-crime problem, where it's like the system's just going to assume that like this creative like is or isn't going to work, and it's never going to have a shot. Like, you're just never going to know. And you look at like this, we're recording this, I don't even know what month it is now. It's like early February, but like, last night were the Grammys, and Taylor Swift just announced her new album, right? Like, the entire internet changed for like 10 minutes last night. And like, that is like where a person, like, I think is going to be able to like capture the creativity in the moment much better than these machines can, I think. But it's like, that's what, to your point, like P&G, these are like, they're marketing companies. Like, they found a way to like connect arbitrary products in many cases with like how you feel. And it seems crazy to just hand it over to the walled gardens. And I'm like a walled garden apologist. And like, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I think our hope is that there'll be ways for this creative data to be augmentative into those types of tools. But I think ultimately, like the question I always come back to is like, what is the goal of marketing? And like if every marketer on the planet is about to get an infinity button for their content, which is happening, like and not like next year or 5 years from now, but like in March. Then how's a brand going to succeed? And like basically you're going to have to show up in some way that stands out amongst like an infinity of content. I feel like there's going to have to be some degree of non-machine component in that. Now there's going to be a lot of AI involved, and this definitely fits in that. Like AI is not going to steal your job, but someone who uses it better than you will.
Yeah, I mean, and with that, like hearing you two talk about it, like I'm just so curious the human response, the emotional response that a lot of these brand companies have tapped into over the last 100 years. Like, how are you thinking about measuring that? Like, are they able to measure that and like find the balance between like certain ads are lower funnel and those are KPI, those are hard KPIs. Someone bought, someone clicked, something did something. Whereas some of the other creative, you can't measure in the clicks and the engagements necessarily. It's like, did people have a positive reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, like what we sort of see is that there's frankly a lot of different KPIs that different companies care about. We're sort of going through and trying to connect all the different measurement partners so that if someone is really focused on brand, then we can sort of tie into in a far more real-time basis, brand impact than, kind of looking at, a brand lift study, 4 months from now. If they're interested in offline sales, we can work through, AMC or some other sort of, clean room environment to actually tie like this creative intelligence all the way through to those offline sales events. I'm actually going to the Super Bowl in a couple days. We're doing a joint panel with the guys at EDO. I don't know if you know those guys, but they're sort of cool company. And what they do is basically look at like really fine search results. They can correlate television to immediate impact. And so like we the first thing we do is when we talk to a customer is like, what is success? What is the Bible for you in terms of like sort of how you're measuring? And then that's what we sort of build the measurement framework around, and it varies a ton from client to client.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to think as you talk about it, like as once all like the Lego pieces are in place and kind of like sort of this inevitable sort of AIification happens, it'd be interesting to like, it's like onboarding onto VidMob. It's almost like if you're a CMO, it's like you should like be able to like tell it what matters to you, like tell it like what feelings does your brand emote. Like it really does kind of feel like you can start to get back to this world of like, these are my brand values. This is like what I actually care about. Because like, I feel like for this previous iteration, because creative was just so hard to get going in the first place, like you couldn't have that level of nuance. And I think, now like a brand guidelines brief means more than ever, in a weird way, which is cool.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you guys would just be amazed at how much content just is like patently terrible. So we just had a large customer about a month ago, connected over 1,000 ad accounts around the world in the span of a couple of weeks. And I was looking at sort of a kind of a recent like QBR we did with them, and their CMO now is able to like literally look at like every country in the world and see how all of the ad creative in those countries is adhering to just like basic platform best practices, right? And when you start looking at this and seeing that like, majority of content in some markets has like no call to action, no logo, or maybe all of that information is like at the very, very end. And so, only like less than 1% of their audience is seeing their logo or call to action. So they're literally just like lighting 99% of their money on fire. Like that's almost like more the norm than not. And so like there's so much room to improve just on like basic blocking and tackling before you get into like the really exciting stuff of like truly like strategic analysis and starting to like, really kind of improve creative.
Yeah, Alex, well, I know you got a ton going on, but before we let you go, just one thing that I've like know that you guys do at VidMob that I've always thought is awesome that I think people should know about is, can you just quickly give us a rundown on what VidMob Gives is and the types of experiences that's led to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, like I'm so psyched you asked about that. And it's actually very timely because my right arm just hurts from getting a couple of vaccines today. So I'll tell you why. So Gives started early in the company. I think like 2016, and it was just like at the end of one quarter, I had this kind of realization that like if we're just going to basically set a target for every quarter, either exceed it or not, and then reset it for the next quarter, like the idea of doing that for like the rest of my life just seemed like I don't know, it wasn't enough. And so, a bunch of us here really rallied around this idea that VidMob had to be something more than that. Like we had to build a company that was just about more than just like sort of, driving growth and profitability. And, for us, what we decided was that we had to like sort of bring like meaningful impact in the world. And so we launched VidMob Gives. We actually built a 501c3 when we were like, tiny. I remember our lawyers being like, I don't think you guys need a foundation at this point. But ever since then, we've been, donating, 1% of revenue, 1% of time, and actually, right before we did the Series D, we donated 1% of our equity into the 501c3. So, basically like a $5 million, contribution into that. And what we do is we basically say, hey, like if the largest marketers in the world need this technology to be more effective with their creative, then probably so also do like, basically all the NGOs and nonprofits out there. And so we've worked now with literally hundreds of charities all over the world. We give them, we help them make creative for free. We help them, use our analytics to understand how to communicate better and be more effective. And then all we ask in return is that they tell us what their KPI is, and that they tell us how we did. And those KPIs are like super cool. Like it might be like, hey, I want to make 1,000 wigs for cancer patients in LA that like have lost their hair. I want to read to 25,000 students over the course of a year. And so internally we look at this as like almost like a Harper's Bazaar. And we do all sorts of, we actually do like cool service trips too. So like our best employees, like the people who get like exceeds ratings, are able to apply to go on service trips. We took a group to Brazil to build houses with an organization called Techo a year ago. And actually in 3 weeks, I'm going to Rwanda with I think 12 people from the company, and we're going to spend 10 days doing service work with an organization called Collmer. So I just got Hep A, polio, and typhoid, vaccines today, and I can't wait. I'm like super excited about it.
Yeah, you're protected. I'm imagining like what's the feedback for employees? Like that's such a cool reward beyond just like, hey, here's a bonus or like here's a gold star and like that's it. This is like such a bonding experience, such a transformational kind of life experience.
Yeah, no, like listen, it's I think when we see in like our employee feedback surveys and everything, like the Gives work is the thing that comes back like most commonly as the part of the company that's been like most impactful for them. So I mean, my recommendation to like any young company is like build some sort of like purpose orientation into what you do. And I think like for us, like it's tied into like VidMob software and how we show up. So it's kind of it's an easy story. And we've it's been a great investment for the business. I think it's definitely led to attracting better people, retaining them longer. So any board should approve it. And it also just frankly makes going to work more fun.
Well, Alex, we appreciate you taking the time today, kind of walking through all of that. For anyone interested either in learning more about VidMob Gives and VidMob and what you guys are doing, where can they find you?
They can find me in the office 5 days a week in New York City. In a more reachable way, I'm on Twitter at Collmerica. We've got VidMob website, and we're kind of all over LinkedIn. So a bunch of ways to find us. And then I write fairly frequently on LinkedIn and the company blog, and trying to find our way through what it means to be a creative data company.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see it. You guys have built an awesome business. We've seen it from like the beginning to where it is now, and it is very cool. And I agree with you. You guys are positioned to crush it. So thank you, man. I know you have a ton going on. We appreciate it. If I don't talk to you until after you're back from Rwanda, be safe. Don't get polio.
And listen, guys, honestly, I can't leave without saying it. We wouldn't be where we are today without your partnership in the early days. So, first of all, thank you. And I'm so excited to see what you guys are building. It looks awesome, and it makes me very nostalgic to the early days of VidMob.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Alex.